Sadly, there's no prizes for guessing the backdrop, but I'm here with Rory Delargy, who's a freelance journalist, these days predominantly with the Irish field. Long history working for in the racing game. Rory, thanks for agreeing to do this. Can you tell us a bit about how you got into this game?
Well, I guess you've got to go back to the real roots of it and where you get an interest from racing from in the first place. And for me, it was watching the ITV7 or BBC racing with my dad when I was a youngster. My earliest memory, racing-wise, was watching the 1977 National, which obviously was Red Rum's third National. And I know that my dad had 50p each way on Red Rum for me, and he had 50p each way on Andy Pandy for my older brother, and I remember the entire family watching it, and as Andy Pandy went clear coming into second Beechers, my brother was getting excited. And when he capsized on landing, he stormed off in a huff, and I don't think he's watched another horse race since, actually, and that was, it's 40 odd years ago, isn't it? Whereas Red Rum came through and won, and clearly that made an impression on me. I have a vague recollection even then that I knew that Red Rum was something special, that he was the horse to be with in the race for whatever reason. This is not meant to be 40-year-old after timing, but I guess that I was watching racing even before that with my dad. And when you come from my kind of background, very sort of traditional Irish family, you don't tend to talk to your dad about the important things in life. You know, you just get on with whatever you got to do, and you maybe find a bit of common ground. So me and my dad never had any deep and meaningful conversations, but we talked about racing all the time, and that gave us a bond. So it was really special to me to sit with him and have a mug of tea and watch the racing and talk about the horses as equals almost. And that was really important to me as a teenager or even younger than that. That it made me feel that I was, significant in some sort of way. So I love my racing from a very early stage. I was never going to go away.
Was gambling a big part of it from a very early age as well?
Yeah, from the age of about, I guess, 8 or 9, we'd watch the racing, but on a Saturday morning, my dad would get up. I grew up on a farm, and we'd get up and do a couple of things in the morning with the sheep, whatever it happened to be. And then my dad would drive me into the village, which is a few miles away, and we would buy the paper and sit in the car and leaf through the Irish News as it was, and we'd each find a treble. He'd have a £1 treble and I'd have a 50p treble, and he'd obviously put the money on for them. And I'd give him my selections, he'd write the slips up and go into the betting shop and come back, and then we'd drive home. And then when I was about 13, we moved on from me just giving him my selections, and he said, right, we're off down the shop. So we'd go into the betting shop and we'd read the paper and we'd make our selections and we'd have a bet. So from the age of about 12 or 13, I was going into betting shops and punting. I had no idea until I came across to the UK that there was any restriction in terms of age regarding betting. It was a coming of age thing. You hit puberty, then you're old enough to have a small punt on the horses. So I was betting, and it started off as a 50p treble or a £1 treble, and then I, later on at school, when I used to go into the shop on my own, I'd have a 20p Yankee or something like that. So we're not talking big stakes. I do remember going to university and having 100 quid on a horse for the first time. And I can't remember what the race was. It was a horse that Jenny Pittman's called Villa Ricos in a novice hurdle at Wincanton or something like that. It was 8 to 15, and I remember sweating buckets. I remember thinking, this is an absolute certainty. It's buying money, and then having the bet, and then panicking blindly for about 10 minutes until the race was over. So I probably learned at that stage that I maybe didn't have the mentality to be a professional punter, even if I was a fair judge. But yeah, I've punted, as I said, since childhood, but it was recreational for a long time.
You say fair judge, and I'm reliably informed that you are a fair judge, and I think that's been fairly modest. People love to hear about good days. Have you got one?
Well, I suppose, this is reflecting glory on someone else, I suppose. You've obviously done an interview before with Andrew Mount, who is a mutual friend. I think we all probably had our best day when we landed a share of the Scoop 6, which was mostly at Haydock. And it was a big day for me because I was working for Timeform Radio at the time, and I got an invite to the Betfair box. And I remember, oddly enough, inviting my sister's father-in-law, because he lived in Warrington and he loved his racing, so it was, again, a bit of a bonding experience. I invited him along to the box, and we happened to have a go in the Scoop 6, and it was I think it was the biggest rollover ever at that stage. And Andrew was entirely responsible for picking them out, but he always used to ask me for my opinion, and it was always the same every week. He would say, is there anything you fancy? And I'd say, well, I fancy X and Y, and he goes, well, either I've stuck those in already or I'm not going to stick those in. I'd like to think on that occasion I might have convinced him to stick one of the winners in a horse called Heathcliff. He was trained by Richard Lee at the time, and he won a 3.25 mile handicap hurdle at Huntingdon. And I was quite keen on one in the handicap chase at Haydock that Andrew wouldn't put in, that was beaten. It was Monmouth, actually, Grand National winner. I think he was beaten a short head in the handicap chase at Haydock. But the bottom line with that Scoop 6 syndicate was that all of us who got involved, and there were plenty of us playing either to reasonable chunks, and a lot of people paying tenors and 20 quids, as you well know, a lot of people you'd know from the racecourse. But Andrew's word was final. He didn't interfere, and that was a tremendous day. I don't think they were the most ridiculous results ever seen. I think there were 9 or 10 of us who shared it, but it was still a huge feeling to be part of that. And I remember the final race was a listed sprint at Lingfield, which was called Duff, one for Eddie Lynham. And I remember thinking, I'll lay this for a few bob, just so I can watch the race. I'll try to get part of my stake back. And I ended up backing it instead. I thought, sod this. I'll feel terrible if we win and I've given away 100 quid of it by laying it. So I've ended up having 20 quid or something on it, 50 quid, so we could watch the race. And I think there were a few guys from a Betfair syndicate who were there as well. So there were about 12 of us gathered around this table, one of whom, oddly enough, a guy I'd never met before, called Tony Calvin. And so I ended up running into a bunch of people who I didn't know from Adam, who I've got to know quite well since. And that was tremendous, watching Duff win this 6 furlong contest at Lingfield to give us that Scoop 6. The irony of it was that we were an absolute shoe-in to win the bonus fund the following week, because we had 9 or 10 goals at the Hennessy. And the Hennessy, it doesn't tend to be won by a horse outside the top 10 in the betting, and somehow we've managed to miss it. Madison de Burley won the race, and we had the likes of Big Bucks in there, and some very decent chasers, but Madison de Burley got the job done for David Pipe. And I remember kicking myself for not, I mean, that would have been a big win. It would have been worth I don't know, about 40 or 50 grand to me personally. And I remember, again, absolutely kicking myself that I didn't just have a bet on Madison de Burley, knowing which horses we didn't have covered. And I decided at an early stage, I'm not going to complicate the day. We're going to go out and have a good time. We were being schmoozed by the tote. They always looked after the Scoop 6 winners. Well, not all of us were, but a selection were. And I thought, I'm just going to enjoy this. I was actually in the Champagne bar underneath the stand with one or two of the others from the syndicate. And I thought, I'm not going to muck around and do anything that I shouldn't do here. I'll just enjoy the day. And of course, because I've thought about backing Madison de Burley after the event, I was thinking, could have guaranteed myself 20 grand there if I used my noggin, but it was still an absolutely tremendous experience. And of course, I think there was 3 times we'd won the Scoop 6. We never got the bonus pot to go with it, which would have been the icing on the cake, but that was a great experience. And it's been a real pleasure getting to know Andrew, who's one of the better, as you would agree yourself, one of the better judges in the game, and one of the nicest guys in the game as well.